I have no sensitivity in like all of my thigh, and there's this big red mass there that looks like the map of the Soviet Union.
Wow.
I'm very proud of it. It's an awesome manly scar. My father's like a super scientist. He used to work on like rocket fuel projects back in Russia, and he was like making rocket fuel for like their space program or like nuclear missiles or whatever. So he had to sign something that he would never leave the country. And they would not let people leave the country anyway, because we were like Russian Jews. And this is sort of like a second class. It's a little bit like racism in the United States. People say there isn't any, but there's lots. So back when he was working in Moscow in his lab, he gave me a chemistry set. I didn't care about chemistry, and I was terrible at like all the sciences, but he didn't lose hope. So he got me a chemistry set. And the chemistry set was made in like socialist Romania. There was like a burner and all the different elements, and you combine them, and some of them explode and some of them make crystals. And there was one particular experiment that was called something like let's make candy or something. So it came with acid. It wasn't lemon acid, it was just something really just slightly acidic, so you'd add it to the sugary mass, and it was part of learning. Like you were supposed to learn about how elements interact with each other. And pour the sugar into the shape, and you pour the acid into it and all the other shit and mix it up, and then wait until it like boils, and then cool it off, and then I guess feed it to your dog or some shit. But I didn't do that because my father had a big jar of hydrochloric acid that he brought from work. And I was like, well, if I'm doing chemistry, I'm gonna do real chemistry. So I poured the 70% acid into the boiling sugar lava, at which point the immaculate Soviet craftsmanship of the whole chemistry set started disintegrating on me. So the molten sugar lava with the 70% acid fell like right on my leg, like in slow motion. It was like Pompeii. It was amazing. And it didn't hurt at all because it burned all of my nerve endings off. So I had like a crusted candy leg, and obviously it was all poured on like the couch and stuff, and it burned like holes in it and destroyed the whole thing. To take it back a little bit, that was the day where my parents bought like a new living room set of furniture. So they bought a new couch and a new bookshelf, and there was like and somebody gave them like a VCR, which I've never seen before. And then my parents came home and they're like, what happened? Where's your leg? Like, what the fuck? So after that, my dad lost all hope in like me being a chemist. He was like, well, that's it. That was extra stupid, so you're done. Yeah, and since then I had this amazing scar, so that was pretty good. It's like right here. It's like this big. And then they still remember the couch they destroyed because it cost like 1,000 rubles or some shit like that. Fast forward like a couple of years, and then the Soviet Union was collapsing. A whole bunch of people wanted to get out right away because they were trying to before, but it was kind of a closed country. And it was 1991, so it was time to get the fuck out. And there was like a big revolution where people toppled a statue. They always topple a statue. It was like a symbol of the KGB. It was like, so like whenever they show like a whole bunch of people pushing that down, that's what it is. Anyway, it was a revolution, and my parents are like, this is gonna turn into a shit show. Revolutions never end well. And yeah, they never do. It's always worse afterwards. Like people think it's gonna be awesome, and then they realize it's not because all the criminal elements gonna take over. So yeah, fun times happen. Anyway, there were a whole bunch of Jews in the Soviet Union, and they all wanted out, and there was this country that was just like offering to get them for free. And since they were occupying like a whole bunch of land that they needed people, super happy to get like European looking people in there because a little bit racist. So all the Russian kids were like, or not all the Russian like people, they were wearing like socks and sandals, and they didn't shower, and they were like all gross. They're overeducated, and they like hated the heat, and it was weird. Russian kids are trying to go into the school there, and they have to learn this fake language that was just invented for the purpose of that country existing. Because Hebrew is not a real language. It was made up in the 50s by some idiot. It's like Esperanto, except dumber, because the rules are arbitrary and are made based on like the holy book that they were reading before. So yeah, you learn this language, and the language is really limited. It's ugly. There's lots of sounds. And there was a point when you go into the 6th grade, and then your teacher asks you, "Hey, so did you do that thing that everyone's supposed to do?" And you're like, "What are you talking about?" And it's like, bris. And you're like, "What?" And you go back to home and you ask your parents, "What's bris?" And then they're like, "Oh, that's it's a circumcision." Once in a while, you see like one of the kids, like the Russian kids you were like playing in the yard with, they would go into the class and everybody would like, "Oh, it's Boris. He just had his bris." And everybody would get up and clap, and Boris has this weird diaper thing. Because he just went right back to school. Yeah, it was really weird. And awkward, because he wasn't a real Jew until then, and then now he became like, like he's real. There was no reason to do it in Russia, because like why the fuck would you identify as a Jewish person? There was not a thing.
Yeah.
And then I knew a kid that had that done, and everybody thought he was like mutilated or something. Like his family abused him. And then I came to the fucking Middle Eastern country and I realized, oh, that's what it was. He was just like, yeah. So me, my father, and my brother, we all went to this facility, and they were doing this to like the million like Russian Jews that were going from like the Soviet Union to Israel. It was like a conveyor belt for cows. They would just go in. At the end of it was a super drunk rabbi, and he'd bless you. And before that, there was a line, and you'd like go into this room, and you sit in a whole bunch of beds with a whole bunch of like Russian dudes, and they're like 50-year-old men and grandpas and like kids and stuff, and they're all families generally, right? And they're all talking about, so it's time. I guess you're gonna do it. And then me and my dad and my brother, he's like 7 years old and he's sitting right next to us, and the guy comes in and he's like, oh, it's no big deal. First they do a shot right next to the thing, then they do a shot right into the thing, and then the nurse comes in and the rabbi, and then they work on you like you're an octopus, and then you're out, and they give you a glass of wine, and you get your Hebrew name. So we're all looking at each other and we're like, why has this happened? Like, and I don't think anyone knows why it was happening. I think it was like a case of mass hysteria. Because my best friend in middle school refused to do it. He just said, I'm not doing it, and he's fine. He was completely fine. Nobody like asked him about it. He went to the army over there, he like got married, nobody gave a shit. But like 90% of everyone who did it, like they all did it. At this point, I'm like, okay, fine. I guess it's happening to me. They take your pants off. It's honestly, it's like a concentration camp. There's like naked dudes just going in, and they go lie down on the thing. They give you 2 shots, and then you're supposed to be like just relaxing, right? Like while they're doing it. Except right on top, there's this big lamp that's shining a light onto your like shameful location, and you can see everything that's happening in the reflection right in the metal shit. So you're lying there, and you're like, holy fuck, what is going on? And there's like blood and stuff, and they're siphoning things. But they have a fucking needle. It's not high tech. They just have like 2 nurses, one like with a needle and one with a siphon. It's like a dentistry operation. And then there's like a rabbi with scissors or whatever. And they're like, oh, you're done in 10 minutes. You like they stitch it up, and then you get out, and then you go outside. You're wearing like this thing. You go outside, like fresh stitches, and then a rabbi who's like drunk out of his mind because there's 2,000 people pass by him, and he drinks like a shot of wine for them, and the shot gives you a shot of wine, and it's like, oh, here's your new Hebrew name. Your new Hebrew name is blah 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 blah. And then you end up living with your shame and stitches, and it's very sad forever. And then you have to take the stitches out. And then at one point, like, we're all complaining, and my mom comes out and is like, I saw it, it's nothing, that's not that big of a deal. And we're like, oh, great! That was your idea. It was her idea too. She's like, oh, you guys are gonna feel like you're, standing out too much. This is a whole family affair. There were like whole families that did it. It's crazy and kind of culty. But it's okay, I worked hard and I got over it eventually.